If you're privileged enough and you've lived life long enough, you've gone through some things, some trials and tribulations, and you probably have made a lot of mistakes. This is just your friendly reminder to, not dwell on that and to forgive yourself for mistakes that you've made. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. And one of the things, I've counseled numerous patients over the year, probably thousands at this point. And one of the things that happens when people get mistreated in relationships, they are betrayed, they're abused, or, they hang in there and they give people chance after chance after chance, or they don't learn their lesson the first time. A lot of times they'll get caught up in this rut where they are so defeated and they feel like I'm so stupid, or I just wasted so much time, or gosh, how can I not see that I was making the same mistake over and over again? And, it happens. Sometimes we have to, learn lessons a little bit more than others. Like, when I went to school, Algebra 2 trig or like organic chemistry was one of those things that I had to tutor for like some hours for that. And that's kind of how life lessons are. Sometimes you have to kind of keep going over it. You have to look at the problem. Sometimes you're befuddled. Sometimes you just can't figure it out. Sometimes you just have this knee-jerk reaction where you're really just activated. You're triggered and you do some of the same things over and over again. And this is just a reminder to be kind to yourself, and be gentle with yourself, because after all, what is it really going to help for you to be mean to yourself, to scold yourself and get down on yourself, and, basically demonize yourself? It's really not going to help. And I would invite you to, just go ahead and say, you know what, I made a mistake. This is, what am I learning from this? What is this supposed to teach me? And Dr. Jones is not exempt from this, because sometimes I catch myself doing the same thing, especially if it's like a really important decision, like work decision. And I'm just like, oh, but, we have to be young and dumb before we're old and wise. And not necessarily even dumb either. Sometimes, even with our best intentions, we can make mistakes, or we can make decisions that aren't so good. Sometimes we can be stressed. Sometimes we can be super anxious. We can overlook, or we can make, judgment calls or decisions that are maybe not well thought out, or just are done on an impulse, and long term they don't work out to our benefit. And any number of things could happen. Maybe you're in a perpetual state of grief. Maybe you've lost a lot of people. Maybe a lot of people haven't shown up for you, and maybe there's a little bit of desperation in there for a connection. Maybe there's some desperation in there to be loved, to be touched, to be held, to be kissed, all those kind of things. And all of those things are good things to want to have. But it's just like going to a grocery store. You don't want to go to a grocery store when you're starving. Otherwise, everything looks good and you want to try things. And before you know it, you've spent $300 on food in the store that it's insane. So, and it's kind of the same way in life. If we're not taking care of the wounds, if we're not reflecting on things, and sometimes that can happen too, because we get so busy with work, we get so busy with kids, we're stressed out, we got to pay bills, we got to eat, we've got 1,000 different things going on. The car is messing up. You got a little bit of money and the damn car breaks down. All this kind of stuff happens, right? And it kind of it clouds the vision. And sometimes we're not able to think through every decision. or sometimes we're not able to function as the best version of ourselves. And sometimes even like, especially if you have trauma, you know, you might have been operating in a dissociative state and you didn't even know it, and then someone pointed something out, or maybe you woke up one day and you had a moment of clarity. All these things could happen. Um, and, if you're lucky, it'll happen before you're 6 feet under, and you can have a moment to reflect and change it. And if that's the case, forgive yourself and move on and just say, you know what, this is what happened, and this is this is my life. I've lived a very colorful life. I've done a lot of colorful things, and I think this is a good reminder. You can always, what I always used to love to do and still love to do it, is talk to the elderly. Because, when you talk to people that are elderly, like my grandmom and them, they've been through it all, from affairs within the family, all kinds of stuff, alcoholism, deaths of a child, everything, all, and just depression, although they didn't call it that back in the day. And, but elderly people have a lot of wonderful stories that they can share with you and talk about how they, done things and can reflect, and do that. And so that's, it's always interesting to hear how other people have held it, how other people have handled it and gone through certain things, maybe worse than you, maybe a little bit different, or maybe similar, whatever the case may be. But, there's something for everybody. So just a reminder, forgive yourself. And, I think the other gift that talking to the elderly gives us, and talking about our mistakes, is like, there's I think there's a lot of power in sort of speaking like your truth. And, if you notice the elderly people, they're really not bashful. They've seen it, done it all. They don't care what their skin looks like. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes not so good thing. But in any case, they don't really care. They're really not inhibited in what they say. And they could just sort of let it go. And it is. And so maybe that's a little something that you can take for yourself. Hope that helps. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, follow, and share. Thanks so much.